committee. First item on the agenda is webcasting introduction. And I'm just going to read the following announcement. This meeting is to be webcast. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet or filmed and will be capable of subsequent repeated viewing or another use by such third parties. Please also be aware that if technical difficulties interrupt the meeting that cannot be overcome, I may need to adjourn the meeting. Members are reminded of the need to unmute their microphones before speaking. And welcome, John, just in time. Apologies.
My apologies.
It's okay. Apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies, Jackie?
No apologies, Chairman.
And substitute members. Do we have any substitutes this evening?
No substitute members.
And declarations of interest. Do any committee members have any declarations?
No.
Okay. Any other members? No. So the first item onto minutes. Is everyone happy with the minutes from the meeting of the 8th of September?
Agreed.
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 Brilliant. First item on the agenda is the Council House Building Progress Report, phases 3 to 5. And I believe I'm going to hand over to Deborah to present that report.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you, Councillor Whitbread. So the recommendations and decisions of this report are that the contents of the progress on phases 3 to 5 of the Council House Building Programme be noted and presented to Cabinet in line with the terms and conditions of the Council House Building Cabinet Committee. So the report sets out the progress that's been made in phases 3 to 5, and as you can see in the executive summary, it has details of each specific package along with the number of properties or units being produced. And we've also got some information there about Ladyfields and Chequers B, which will be issued for tender in Jan-Feb 2021. Within the report, there's also an update on phase 5. And moving on, just on phase 3, this, as you're aware, has been delayed. Firstly, it was to do with some issues with services, and later we were hit with some delays due to COVID. However, we do anticipate a handover mid-January. Phase 4.1, as you can see, is contracted to TSG, and we are on site with that contract at the moment. Phase 4.2, we're also contracted as well, and as you can see where it says SOS, those are the start on site dates, and we're on site with those schemes as well. We've got phase 4.3. Now, we've made some changes to 4.3 because 4.3 included a group of single site projects. And John, Mr. Cosgrove, has looked at these projects and for a number of reasons has come to the conclusion that in the state they were presented, they didn't necessarily add value for money to the council, and there is definitely the possibility that moving forward there is capacity for a lot more units on those sites than originally anticipated. 4.4, which is on page 24, you can see is 28 units. And if we just move on to page 25, which talks about phase 5, these are some initial thoughts around phase 5 sites. And as Mr. Cosgrove has done with a number of other sites, Mr. Cosgrove and his team will be liaising with members to discuss the elements of these schemes and to discuss what the potential challenges may be going forward, what residents might want to see, what members want to see. And we're particularly talking about, you know, maybe changes to the garden areas, the landscaping and parking. So I think just to reiterate, we are very much in the early stages of our phase 5, and Johnny's working hard at the moment to contact members so we can have those discussions. We've also got on this report St. John the Baptist Church, which a number of you will be aware of because it was presented at Cabinet last week, and funding for the programme was agreed subject to planning. We have some other schemes in addition that are not on this report, but will be on the next report. We just need to firm up a few more details. One of those being the proposal and the possibility of purchasing 100 units from Qualis. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah, and thanks for that very detailed report. I know we've covered the council house building programme in a lot of detail over the last few cabinet meetings, in particular the plan for phase 5, and I thank John for his engagement with members so far on that. And also I know I spoke on the St John the Baptist Church key worker scheme and the community hall with that, and that's a really innovative scheme which I know as an EPI member I'm particularly proud to be bringing forward. I'm going to go out to committee members first. Does anyone have any comments or questions on the report? Councillor Bedford.
Thank you. Very pleased to see St Peter's Avenue Shelley on there. I know I've been working closely with John. It's about community engagement with Shelley. This is a site, if other members are not aware of it, that's had no money spent on it for approximately 40 years. It suffers terribly with access problems, as the road there was built and designed for your classic sort of Austin A40 type car with only about a foot each side. So all the residents tend to use a lot of the pavements for parking areas. The curbs have been severely damaged. And in the past, we've given away some of the areas of green in front of the flats that really we should be taking back into our control at some point, or considering it at least, to create wider roads. The problem we've got is the lack of parking. I would welcome the actual addition of additional parking in there. I know it's difficult with our current policies, but the problem is that we have to remember that the Shelley estate is actually quite remote from other parts of the district. So transport links are terrible in that area. You know, even to get to Ongar, it's a good mile walk from the bottom end of Shelley up to the main road to try and find a bus connecting it. And the roads are too narrow to take buses down anyway. So I think there is a possibility. There's a lot of work that can be done there, and I welcome the fact that EFDC are actually taking St Peter's Avenue and Shelley to task now and looking at doing some improvement works there. It's well beyond time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bedford. Do any of the officers want to comment on that, or no? Councillor Phillip.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of questions. On phase 3, the delay allegedly down to COVID, 23 weeks, seems a little excessive given that that's virtually 6 months, and even the lockdowns together weren't that long. So it does seem somewhat excessive in terms of extension because of that. I realise we're well through it now, but I'd like an explanation of that. And also on page 22 in phase 4.2, the vast majority of the start and site dates were in January this year. Is that right?
Thank you, Councillor Phillip. I know that there was a lot of issues with sourcing material, but I'm sure Deborah and John can talk in more detail on that. So if we go to Deborah first, if that's okay.
Thank you. John, would you like to give some detail around those points, please?
Can't hear you, unfortunately, John. Mute.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Right, my apologies. In terms of 4.1 was approved at the December 19th committee. It then was intended to enter into contracts by February, at which point COVID came to be in March. As a consequence of that, the delay from the contractor's ability to do his design and build element did have a severe impact on the start on site in respect of 4.1. In terms of 4.2, the tender report was produced in line with the anticipated programme in March, tendered, report analysed, but unfortunately it wasn't able to get to be brought to a committee for approval until June. If you recall, there was quite a delay in getting the committees, the tender report approved at committee. That subsequently was approved. The contract was awarded to Indicom on 4.2. There is a typing error there. It should be 21, so apologies for that. But there is a delay of about circa 4 months associated with that, from getting the tender report approved, getting the detailed design work, and actually making a start on site, which is anticipated to be January 21.
Thank you for that. That makes sense.
Deborah?
Yes, if I could just also make comment there. Thank you, Councillor Whitbread. I had a conversation with Councillor Whitbread this week, because these meetings are are quite infrequent throughout the year. It does sometimes cause us delays in terms of getting tender documents approved. So I did have that discussion, as I said, with Councillor Whitbread, and we're thinking about whether we need to book additional meetings, particularly around the time when we need to get tender documents approved, so we don't have delays due to getting tenders approved.
Thank you, Deborah. And you took the words out of my mouth, because I was just about to say we are going to look at perhaps having these slightly more regularly, so there isn't that time delay with tenders, because we know it is an issue that sometimes holds back some of our developments. Jackie Lever, I can see you've got a hand up.
Yeah, the delay was because of the COVID. We had to cancel one of the meetings. I think we do have these meetings, is it 5 times a year?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah.
I think perhaps it's something we can assess in the new year, depending on demand, perhaps have an extraordinary one if required, if that's okay with other committee members. But obviously we'll try and keep it to the 5.
Jim, I think traditionally we've scheduled some council house building cabinet committees, but said if we need to more, then we'll fit them in, because we recognise things are tied up with planning and other things to get them in at the right time. Provided you keep them short, I'm sure none of us will mind too much.
Okay, that depends on you as well, committee members. Councillor Aniket Patel.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a general question first, and then I've got questions specific to one particular site in phase 5.2. The general question is really, and it was something that actually arose around Buckers Hill sites, and I think we touched on it previously in a previous council house building meeting. But it's when the sites are waiting for their planning permissions, for example, or after the decant. So basically, after the garages are made void, they tend to be used as for antisocial behaviour. And I was just wondering, I think we raised this issue previously about sites in Buckers Hill, which were being used for congregation and antisocial behaviour in particular. Can you update on what the outcome was on that? Firstly, what steps were taken, and what steps are taken moving forward on all the other sites that become vacated to prevent antisocial behaviour progressing there?
Deborah or John, is that something you can comment on?
Yeah, I'll answer that if I may, please. In respect to the previous approach with the garage sites, a lot of the sites in 4.1 and 4.2 were actually consented in 2016-17, and as part of that process, originally some garage doors were removed to enact what was believed to be the planning consent at that time. Since then, the planning team has considered that now not an appropriate process. But because the garage doors were removed, it involved effectively a 3-part process in respect of demolition. One was once the sites were vacated and the garage door were removed, there then needed to be a contamination survey carried out, and then the garages were then partially demolished, leaving the rear walls in place, because these often form the rear boundaries of adjoining properties. What we're looking to do going forward, and particularly in terms of phase 5, is, for example, one site that we're looking at just at the moment is, as soon as the garages are vacated and we get the contamination report carried out, then we're looking to immediately demolish the sites as far as we're able within the structure and to seal the site off and to make them secure to avoid this continuous antisocial behaviour and the cost of fly tipping removal.
Okay.
Also, to add to that, if I may, we'll be using the opportunity in terms of marketing the good work we're doing in Epping. So by that I mean putting up some hoarding and signs, and we're potentially thinking about putting some graphics on the hoarding to really, as I said, showcase the good work we're doing in providing places where people want to live.
Thank you. Chairman, if I may continue.
Yeah.
So another general question. Sorry, something else has come to mind. Where sites have previously been pulled due to parking stress or refused permission, I can see we're looking to bring forward a couple of those sites now. What work has taken place to evaluate the parking stress or the impact on parking stress within those areas?
John?
Again, if I could answer that, please. It was for that very observation that some of the sites in phase 5 have been chosen. This issue of parking stress is not only a district-wide, it's probably a national issue given the age where these developments were designed and carried out, as Councillor Bedford earlier alluded to. In terms of the sites in phase 5, some of those sites, for example, you're correct, have previously been refused and were subject to parking stress. We believe by having an engagement with the local council representatives, we believe that there may be practical solutions in alleviating some of those, not only parking stress issues, but landscaping and environmental issues that may have been an issue as well. So we want to try and have an engagement with the local council representatives to have more of an holistic conversation about the merits of carrying out development. So residents within the locality just don't see the development in isolation, but potentially see some associated benefit in their environment.
So, Chairman, if I may.
Yes. Yeah.
So, in terms of this engagement, because I think this is going to be key to certainly bringing forward schemes in these locations, can you detail, or maybe not detail, but outline how this communication or consultation with residents will take place?
Well, certainly can. For example, if I may, with Councillor Bedford's approval, I could give you a practical example of how that's effectively started in phase 5. And that is, for example, in Shelley, there is currently a development, Queensway, that has just commenced in terms of development for 4 units. Previously, when we reviewed the potential development sites for phase 5 and beyond, one of the starting points was to review and revisit some of the sites previously assessed in previous years, but to also take a view as to what worked and what didn't work. And there seemed to be, as was outlined in the report presented at the previous committee, there appeared to be a disconnect between what the council officers were promoted for development sites and what local councillors seemed to be willing to consent or support. And that seemed to indicate that that the sites weren't addressing necessarily some of the issues that needed to be addressed within the application. So, for example, looking at Shelley as being one of the first sites within phase 5, when we looked at Shelley, the first site that we looked at there was originally carried out as a feasibility study by Pellins that identified potentially 7 units. Now, when I looked at the area, I thought there was potentially scope for 30 units or more in the area. But in doing so, it was requisite on certain historical issues being confronted and addressed, not least of which the road network system being just one of them, for example. Without labouring the detail of that too much, just to give you a flavour, it's a mixture of a number of issues, as we can see. One is there's a variable road width, where the road appears to be narrowed in places, therefore on-street parking becomes a bigger problem. There's a number of flats that are in the area that are predominantly owned and controlled by Epping Forest that do not have sufficient parking arrangements, and therefore residents are resorting to having to park on the carriageway. The third element, as we've briefly discussed previously, is that Essex County Council's cost for a drive crossing appears to be, and I've yet to get to the bottom of this and have an engagement with Essex County Council, but I'm keen to do so. They seem to be charging somewhere in the order of £2,500 plus VAT, which may be cost prohibitive to a great many residents. Now, we're looking at, as part of Shelley's feasibility report, which will be presented to the committee for approval to progress, these issues will be dissected, analysed and presented to you as a cabinet in detail, so you can see the issues and what the cost benefit is in terms of an approach that may or may not be able to be taken in certain ones. But for example, in terms of the drive crossings, if our contractor was on site doing construction work, then we strongly believe that those drive crossings could potentially be delivered to residents at a cost of circa £1,000 to £1,500, rather than the £2,500 to £3,000. That might, for example, encourage some residents to invest in a drive crossing where perhaps previously it's been cost prohibitive. The benefit to the council, as I've alluded to before, will be supported hopefully by a chartered surveyor's report, and that is that as a landlord and as a property owner of the properties on the estates, it's in Epping Forest District Council's interest to maintain and protect the value of those properties wherever possible. So when they do become the subject of a right to buy application, then the resultant valuation at that point in time will hopefully show an increased level of valuation and a return back to the council, because some of those properties have off-street parking arrangements which are considered more valuable than what appears to be in some areas within the district very congested on-street parking arrangements. That's one aspect. The other aspect, as a consequence of trying to address and remove the on-street parking, is then the opportunity to improve environmentally the landscaping quality and the aesthetics of the approach into the area. Another area is to review the playground, the play equipment, the play area, for example, in the area, where the quality and the design might be able to be capable of enhanced. If more people are going to be capable of being housed, then there will clearly be infrastructure changes and enabling works that will be required as a consequence.
Thanks, John. That's a very comprehensive answer. Councillor, just have to come back one more time.
I've got several more questions, Chairman. No, thank you very much for that, John. As Councillor Whitbread said, it was a comprehensive response. I know when we had previous cabinet meeting, the new approach that was detailed, I think that Mr. Fenton led on, was very warming. Actually, I think that the approach that you're looking to adopt now, I think, is going to be absolutely key now to getting some of these sites across the line, and that there was very good support for this approach coming forward. I think obviously the proof is going to be in the pudding, as it were.
Very much so.
To see whether we can, we can appease local residents' concerns, and try and work with them in a proactive way to bring forward mutual benefit results, just not just to the wider district, but also to local residents in those localities. Specifically on the Hornbeam Close site in Buckhurst Hill. Now, I remember when this plan was pulled previously, and it was felt at that time, because there was a number of sites that came forward on Hornbeam Road, Hornbeam Close, and this one was felt to be one too many at that time. Now you're bringing it back, but some of the arguments that were there then at that time was, out of the garage sites that were being proposed, this was the garage site that was most occupied. I believe it was fully occupied. So it'd be helpful to understand what the occupancy rates are on this particular site. I know when we spoke about this, giving up some of the previous units, there was talk about where the next there was a suggestion that the next available or the most local garage site would be made available to those that were being displaced. But then when the question was asked where the nearest garage sites are, they were some of those garage sites were at least 3-4 miles away. So in practical terms, that's not going to work moving forward, especially if this site is fully optimized. Secondly, I believe that there is a right of way issue here. So we need proper, clear advice on whether this site can come forward or not before it is brought forward to local residents. It is going to be very contentious because I remember when the other sites were approved previously and then approved that by District Development Committee. They were very contentious sites and brought a lot of negative sentiment towards the council. We've got to really deal with this sensitively and appease local residents. So, okay, if they are going to be giving up, these garage sites, what are they going to be getting back in return? And I'll be keeping a really close eye on that.
Thank you, Councillor Mattel. I'm not sure if there was a question there or more of a comment. But John, do you have any further things to comment on that?
Yes, if I may. That specifically included Hornbeam A. One, because it had been withdrawn, and I believe it was during the period of this hiatus in the planning system previously. And I do believe that the fact that the council built on 3 out of the 4 garage sites has clearly not helped the parking stress issue. So I feel a sense of some responsibility to hopefully work with the local representatives to try and explore and facilitate perhaps some solutions to what is a problem that the residents live with. But the reality of it is, in the area, for example, the parking in the area, I've identified potentially where over 70 parking spaces could be provided. That's one aspect. The other issue is how does it get afforded? How do I recommend to you, the council cabinet committee, how do I put a logical argument to you to say that I think that it's cost effective to do so, apart from the environmental and residential benefits associated with it? So that's the challenge, and it's that challenge that I wanted to bring to the forefront, knowing that this is a particularly potentially contentious issue. And all I would ask is that people try and engage with me in an open manner, with an open mind, and hopefully we can work together to try and explore what some of these solutions may be.
Thank you. And I think that consultation will be it will be really good for residents and local representatives who I know have been particularly anxious about that specific scheme in Buckhurst-Hill. I don't want to dwell too much on the specific scheme tonight, if that's okay. But I know Councillor Neville has got his hand up. I presume it might be on a similar issue, so I'm going to pass to Councillor Neville.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I am going to talk a little bit more about Hornbeam Site A because it's in my ward. I do welcome the approach of the council to come toward members and to discuss it at a really early stage. I was a little surprised that it was brought back. I have 2 specific questions, and then I would like to come back. The first question is on the number of units you have. I know this is very early days, but it says 8 units. Are we thinking of flats here? And the second comes from what you said about you've located 70 parking spaces. Can you elucidate a bit more about where you think those are?
Well, they're in the area, and they're in the very local. There are 2 or 3 areas in the immediate vicinity that's within the control of Epping Forest where there is space to provide car parking. What that will require is further investigation to consider the costing and the funding and the expense and the quasi easements and rights over those areas to ensure that they're deliverable. So nothing that I would propose to you, I wouldn't propose anything to you until I'm reasonably confident that it could be delivered. It'd be foolish to do otherwise. But by the same token, I think it's important that that this engagement is carried out with an open mind, early doors, so we can start to explore. You understand your issues and where the pinch points are better than I do, but I've got a considerable amount of experience in this particular aspect of construction, where I think I may have come across similar situations where I may be able to facilitate or help address some of these issues. But my job is equally to put that in a feasibility report to present to this committee in a logical way that would carry the support of the committee.
You haven't answered the number of units question.
Well, because I haven't had a scheme drawn up, that is a simple estimate depending on a number of factors. It may be more, it may be less.
Okay. The other question I had was in terms of would you also be prepared to meet with residents as well as ward members if that was seen to facilitate things?
Yes, of course I can. I mean, like all things, I can only try and. I have no authority to agree anything. I can discuss and consider and rationalise and present to the committee a number of scenarios. So, by all means, I'm more than happy to meet anybody for a discussion. There's always one caveat: you can't satisfy all the people all the time, but hopefully we can satisfy some of the people some of the time.
Thanks, John. And Stephen, I'm very conscious about residents. There is a lot of concern about this scheme, and I have been in contact with the chairman of the parish council as well, and a number of other parish councillors in Buckershill. So we will be engaging with them and having them conversations. But as you quite rightly said, it is very early on in the scheme, and we're going to be working to make it the best possible scheme for the area. So them conversations will be ongoing. Thank you. Councillor Bedford.
Thank you. Just to reassure Councillor Neville, John has been working extremely closely with me, and his first priority is he's making sure that we get the groundworks done first. You know, looking at who owns what piece of land, what accessibility it is, and there's a lot of work that goes on in the background before we even get to the numbers stage. I still don't know the full detail of the numbers in Shelley, but I do know John's done an awful lot of land registry searches, inquiries about rights of way, footpaths. It's about getting the groundwork there first before we move on to the next stage about what the possibilities are. Bearing in mind, everything is focused around benefits to the community as well, because we have to take the residents along with us. And I fully appreciate where you're coming from, Stephen, but I do feel that John is doing an excellent job in Shelley, and I fully support him in the approach that we're taking. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel. And it's good to hear we've got a test case on the committee. So it's good to hear that John's and the new method is being tested out. One last question from Councillor Wixley.
Right. I think so much has been said before you got to me that probably some of the stuff that I was interested in has perhaps been covered. But because the main thing of interest to me is in Fairmead Ward, which is referenced to Pearls Lane sites A and B. And I'm due to meet John on Monday, weather permitting. And I'm looking forward to meeting him and showing him round because I've got a few ideas. I think there'll be things not just of specific interest, but of general interest that I can show him. I'm pleased in that report that parking stress has seemed to be acknowledged, because I think that refers to the B site, which I think is the end near the junction with England's Lane, because that was an area where I submitted a plan for off-street parking when the council was doing those schemes, unfortunately, because they've stopped doing them. So that was one thing. I think really that's all I can say at the moment, but yeah, I'm looking forward to meeting John. I know what the other thing was, and Annika touched on it. When these schemes were first put forward, which I think is 3 or 4 years ago now, this idea of building on car parking sites or garage sites, it was said at the time that people who were losing a garage, which they used for parking and really wanted to retain, that alternative garage sites would be found for them. I don't know if that has actually ever taken place. I'd be interested to know if anybody has actually managed to transfer to another suitable garage, because obviously I think there are 4 garage sites in my ward, and people would have to park a very long way away from where they're parking now. So that is an issue of concern, because I don't think it was ever a practical solution. But that was the other main point, as Aniket Patel said, that he referred to people having to park, I think he said 3 miles away, which is totally impractical, of course. So they're my points anyway.
Thank you, Councillor Wixley. John, do you want to comment on Councillor Wixley's points?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the replacement of garage sites, there is there's policy decisions really that sort of come to the forefront of my mind, in that who are you trying to satisfy in terms of providing garage sites for? Is it the residents in total? Is it the residents of Epping Forest property? And on what commercial basis are these going to be funded and provided? All those have uncomfortable issues that people need to face into. And finding and relocating sites and providing adequate garages going forward in the future may be part of the solution, rather than just providing additional parking spaces. And that's why, again, there are lots of solutions to housing a car, whether it's in a garage or in a car parking space. And each side will represent a different set of criteria and issues, which I'd like to engage with each on. Some, like I said, I can't cure world famine, but I can certainly have a discussion about it and see where we can go with some of these ideas. And as I say, my obligation is I've got to try and think of how I'm going to put forward a sustainable and supportable proposal to fund these ideas.
Thank you, John. I think we've had a good discussion on that, and there's some really detailed answers. And I would say, if you've got any questions on specific schemes, do reach out to either Deborah, John, or myself, and we'll do our best to answer them. Are committee members happy to note that report?
Noted.
Noted. Good.
Noted.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is tender approval report for phase 4.3 and variations to 4.1 and 4.2. Am I passing back to Deborah? Is it John?
Thank you. I can take this and then pass over to John for any technical questions. So a short report today on the tender of 4.3. So the recommendations are that acceptance is recommended for the tender submitted by TSG for the sum of just over £4 million, and that includes £53,000, which is a provisional sum for contaminated material removal. There are a couple of acceptances which can be found in point 2 and point 3. I wasn't going to go through the report in detail because it's quite a short report, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Members of the committee first. Does anyone have any questions? No? Non-members of the committee? Can't see any hands. Are members happy to agree the 3 recommendations within that report?
Agreed.
Brilliant. And now on to item 8, which is the purchase of land at Mason Way, Waltham Abbey, to build up to 10 units. And I'll pass back over to Deborah. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is a scheme which has been dealt with outside EFDC by our consultant Stephen Tarry from Metaplan, largely because Stephen is aware of the site and had some good contacts there which we could utilise. So just to give you a little bit of background, so this site is part owned by Taylor Wimpey. We own some, and then there is a private owner occupier who owns some. So in effect, this site is landlocked. Some years ago, approval was given to build some flats on the site. Those flats were going to be developed by Ability Housing, and you'll see if you read the report, there is a lot of background to this site. ability housing, provide housing for people with disabilities, and they have a lease. We own the freehold for the land. So this is an opportunity to buy the land and build, I think it's between 10 and 16 properties, depending on what we do. I have today had a consultation meeting with Councillor Sam Kane, and there are no issues really due to the proximity of where this site is. We will, of course, be looking at the environmentals and the landscaping. What I can say on this site is that there is some work needed to the road leading into the site, and we will be putting that right if this is approved. Of course, this all would be subject to planning, which we would hope to submit in the new year.
Thank you, Deborah. And I think this looks like a really positive scheme. And I'm glad you've already had conversations with Councillor Kane, and I'm sure you'll be engaging with the other Waltham Abbey councillors in the coming days and weeks. And members of the committee, do you have any comments on this report? Councillor Phillip.
Thank you, Councillor Whitbread. No, I welcome the fact that we're looking and actually beginning to move forward on things that are not garage sites. It seems like a sensible use of things. I'm glad to see that the funding is coming out of construction out of perhaps Homes England or Right to Buy receipts, or maybe a combination of both, I guess. I guess it does just highlight the need that we probably need to do a revisit of our housing revenue account 30-year business plan to make sure that we don't run out of money at some point in the future, because that would be a bit of a flaw in the overall scheme if we get there. So in the absence of that at the moment, I think this is the right thing to do at this time, but look forward to that coming forward fairly early in next year.
Yeah, and I know Deborah's been working hard on the business plan. I don't know if you want to comment on that, Deborah.
Yes, just to say that I have now submitted a cash flow for the additional sites, so over and above the sites that Mr Cosgrove has been working on, and John has submitted some costings for the sites he's been working on. So collectively, we're looking at quite, as you would expect, a substantial budget over the next 5 years, and that has now gone into our finance team to analyse. Of course, what must be pointed out, and is of great importance, that we now use Proval to look at the feasibility study for all our schemes, and we would not be putting anything forward for building if it didn't provide us with the appropriate internal rate of return.
Thank you, Deborah. Councillor Phillip, would you like to come back on that?
Thank you for that. But obviously, with my finance hat, I just need to make sure that we are being prudent with our resources. I didn't expect anything else, Deborah, and I did know you were working on it. I look forward to being able to see it and make sure that we line it up with our other capital programmes from the General Fund and the revenue from the General Fund as well.
Absolutely. Ambitious but prudent. That's our motto here in housing. Next item on the agenda is any other business. Does anyone have any other business? No? And then
Chairman?
Yes?
Apologies, sorry, I did raise my hand right at the very last minute for the last item, but...
Yeah, you can come in quickly.
All right, just very quickly. I mean, Councillor Phillip has said pretty much what I wanted to say in terms of welcoming the report that's being brought forward. Just wanted to ask, are there any other sites that you're currently considering as well that you could potentially be bringing forward to the committee? Because this, looking at land in this way is a very proactive approach to bringing to helping the council meet its housing target.
I do have a piece of land which I've got Mr Tarry working on at the moment. I would need to do, it's in Waltham Abbey, I can tell you the area. I'd need to do a lot of consultation with members and also the local councillors before I brought that to committee, because it's likely to you know, there's how can I put it, there are other conversations to be taken forward about the site in terms of re-providing for the town council who are on that site at the moment.
Can I make a suggestion, Chairman? Sorry, it'd be worth, if it's not already happening, having a conversation with Karim Prabani, Chief Estates Officer, because I've also asked him to look at parcels of land that we currently own as a council as part of the asset management review we're undertaking at the moment. I think it'd be really useful if we can optimise some of that land to support you in delivering housing for local residents.
So thank you for that. That would be really useful, and we can do that. And we've also got Rachel Smith, who is analysing all the council land which is capable of being built on or well developed, and she'll be working with John and the team going forward as well. So that's two excellent opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that was a good final point, Councillor Patel. And I know that we would rather do these slightly larger sites than the garage sites, which have proven inefficient in the past. So I'm also pleased to see this scheme being brought forward. So back on, unless anyone's got any final questions, please shout. No, back on to any other business. No further business.
No other business.
Thank you, Jackie. Exclusion of public and press. And then I'll close this evening's meeting. Thank you, everyone.